Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast formerly known as the Proncast, Trinity Table Talk. I have with me Bodity77.
Hello.
Meep Moto, who is, named something ridiculous on Discord right now.
Hi, yeah I am.
Myself, Mono Blutron, and Treetop Duelist.
You're saving the birthday boy for the end. You'll have to say happy birthday to me as well, by the way.
We are going to have a very rousing chorus of happy birthday. Is everyone ready?
I think this is another Trinity birthday cast.
God, I wish. And you had one recently, right, Bodity?
Oh, yep.
Wow.
Just a couple days ago.
Birthday boys.
Wow.
We're just awful.
All the admins were born at the same time because we were cloned in a facility. Sorry, I wasn't supposed to say that. But
so which one of you is the Mew,
out.
and which one is the Mewtwo?
I'm pretty sure Treetop is the Mew, and I'm the Mewtwo.
I don't know what you mean, but I'm going to get in and steal your host, because you're doing a shit job. Today, we're talking about consistency in Trinity. Now, consistency in Trinity is quite different from the TCG. In the TCG, you're generally trying to make your deck consistent in order to get to a specific combo. In Trinity, you don't really have, specific combos, so instead, your consistency is trying to smooth out your draws and just kind of, get to your good cards quicker. Does anyone have any generic comments on consistency in general before we start?
I mean, there are combos, it's just that the combos aren't game-winning in the same way they are in TCG, right? That's, I think, the key thing to note, is that you'll oftentimes be chasing down some kind of combo, it's just that that combo isn't going to win you the game next turn. It will if you're chasing down, a Goki combo that's going to extra link and win you the game instantly.
The Trinity combos are... They're more like, if you get your combo, that's how you start playing, than if you get your combo, that's how you end the game. Goki combos with these old end in an extra link, and Trinity combos with these old are this is how I set up my grave and prepare for a grind game with BLS.
See you next turn, Blackluster Soldier. Rank 4 sets up a Minerva and a couple of things in Graveyard and calls it a day.
Exactly.
Well, Assault brings us to the start of the list, really, which is kind of just extra deck searches. I think Assault is just the epitome of this, where any two warriors get you any warrior from your deck. It's super efficient. I think Assault is mostly just used for BLS. Can anyone correct me on this?
If I think of something better, I'll play it.
Yeah, I think most people just use it for BLS. I mean, I guess you could start selling else if you've already drawn BLS.
I think the best part of Assault is how you can sort of one card it out with Armageddon Knight. So you send the Phantom Knights guy, you search your trap card and you play it straight away. And then, Shade Brigade? And then that's just one card Assault. That's really neat.
Yeah.
And it only uses 2 summons, so you can still use the send and equip effect to summon something else from deck.
And usually even something like a 1-star Goki that adds a Goki to your hand is enough to put you far enough ahead in card advantage that now you are firmly in control of the game.
Yeah, because starting your game with 6 cards, one of which is a setup BLS, is really, really strong, for sure.
The point here being that Armageddon Knights are dark and Assaults are light, so you've got your grave set up turn 1.
Yeah, and then you'd be ending on Gaia Saber in that case.
On a similar note, we also have it hasn't come out yet, but Cherubini, is it Black Angel of the Burning Abyss? I'm not sure of the TCG.
That's going to be a problem almost immediately.
Definitely.
I can't quite remember what it does. When it's summoned, you mill a level 3, I think?
No, you have to target a monster on the field and send a level 3 from deck to grave, and then it reduces attack or something. It has an attack modulation effect, and but the milling from deck is cost for that. I'm pretty
that's
sure.
The important part. Yeah,
it's just mill any level 3.
Yeah. In the same vein, you also have Beatrice, who obviously is a lot harder to summon than Cherubini, but can dump anything, and then Lavolval Chain, which also can dump any card from your deck pretty much.
We haven't seen too much use of Lavolval Chain. I think the most common use of it was in Volcanic, where you send a reload and then you've set up your pseudo Regeki.
Yeah, and I think Bodity used it back in the day to mill snow more consistently, but I think it ended up not really being worth it just because you have to invest a whole turn just to set it up.
No, it was good. Like, honestly, I think milling snow with Lavalval Chain was the best use because you could afford to spend an entire turn making Lavalval Chain because snow would let you play on your opponent's turn once it was set up, and it was very necessary when you were playing like 35 cards with only one snow, and you had to like you already had milled some but weren't seeing your snow. You needed to get it engraved because that was how you like stayed in the game basically. But in general, just the way that Lavalval Chain does what Foolish Burial does, does what Beatrice does, like that sort of overlapping role. Even like we were talking about Armageddon Knight earlier, which can also be like a rota for an Armageddon Knight. There are a lot of like overlapping effects that help you set up a variety of different strategies. That it's like that's pretty much what the core of building a consistent deck in Trinity is finding a way to use these like overlapping setup effects or like consistent extra deck monsters that you can make in one of a dozen ways to jumpstart your strategy.
There's another setup effect of Lavalval Chain that we haven't really mentioned, which is you can actually stack your deck with any monster with it. So like next turn you can just draw any monster you like. I haven't really seen it be used for that at all though.
I played like 40 in Minerva Sworn, so I could play like Snow, Luna, and Hydralander, and you would stack the Hydralander with Lavalval. It was pretty nice.
That's just a rogues gallery of cards that were too strong. Oh my god.
Yeah. Yeah, and
I think what we've identified
there
is that every single one of these cards has, at least in some capacity, an effect that looks strikingly like Foolish Burial.
Adding on to this, I think the new Lavalval Chain, the like new creme de la creme, is Scapegoat, and use it to make Reprodocus, I think that's how you pronounce it, and then you make Curious the Lightsworn Dominion, who is a Foolish Burial on summon, and if it leaves the field by any means, you add any card from your graveyard back to your hand. I think this is kind of absurd.
It's even more than a Foolish Burial, right? It mills 3 after Foolishing.
Yeah, if a card is sent from your deck to your grave, it can mill 3, and that triggers off of its own effect.
I don't think there's any way to prevent them from actually getting the Curious effect to add back from grave either. It's just if this card is removed from the field by any means. I think banish face down, which is like super specific, and they can just add Scapegoat back to the deck, back to the hand.
Yeah, it's definitely like
it's everything people worried about Nightmare Griffin, but Foolish Burial on top.
Yeah,
definitely better than the Nightmare Griffin Scapegoat play. Like you just don't have to set a card, like pitch a card to set the Scapegoat if you don't want.
Yeah.
So in a sense, it's like similar to Lavalval in that it can just like truly search your entire deck instead of just like get something engraved. But when it comes down to it, that's sort of part of what generic graveyard targeted mill, like that's part of why it counts as consistency, is because you can do something like use Foolish Burial to get something that is useful and you can get back out of the grave. And so like the Foolish Burial can count as extra copies of a Dragon Ruler or whatever, because the Dragon Ruler summons itself from grave and also from hand. And like this helps you work through the fact that Trinity is Highlander, making decks inherently less consistent than the TCG.
A big problem I've had with Curious before though is if you talk about Lavalval Chain, you can consistently make a Lavalval Chain because it's just 2 level 4 monsters. Curious is quite different. It's rather curious, if I may say so. In the sense, Pun Master Mika strikes again. The difficulty here is like you need 3 monsters with the same attribute but different types. Outside of Scapegoat, I have not found a single way to make this guy. Like you can go summon
TCG, it's usually done with Seraphonite and Mrs. Radiant and Thousand Blades, right? And that's just so inaccessible.
That's like 2 million summons. Like it's just not going to work.
It's like It's like a 10 summon combo. It's like you can do it, but you have to have the right kind of deck, and you're not going to be able to make it in one turn without Scapegoat.
It's like end of their turn, you buddy force for like summon a monk. Your turn, summon Armageddon Knight from deck. Normal summon like another dark. They all have to like be different types.
Yeah. And it's almost like they want you to play this card in a Lightsworn deck.
Lightsworns even struggle with that because the good ones are like
they're all the same.
A lot of the same type.
Yeah, I think it's honestly most usable even without the Scapegoat combo in a deck with a lot of Earth monsters, so you can leverage Reprodocus, because Reprodocus can turn any 4 monsters that are all Earth into, or rather, it can turn any 4 monsters, 2 of which are Earth, into Curious.
The TCG combo for Lightsworn was you don't make it with lights, you make it with Gigantis, Giant Rex, and I think Seraphonite again?
Yeah, that's another one. But I mean, you can make it, I think, with Gofu and any Earth monster, because you can use Gofu and a token to make Reprodocus.
Well, it has to be an Earth Vanilla.
It can only change one of them, can't it?
It has to be an Earth Vanilla as well.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
It has summoning
Anyway, the point here is, getting back on track, it's not really a consistency card, because you can't consistently make it. Which is kind of a weird concept. Things that do mill and are consistent, we mentioned Armageddon Knight. Mathematician, I think, is also a pristine example of a very good card.
Oh, Math's
Sets up
great.
your grave. If they kill it, you get to draw. The amount of times I've seen people not attack into Mathematician, just to, like, deny the opponent a draw, is insane.
Oh, it's horrifying.
So good.
Anyone who's played in, like, 2015 remembers the extreme feels bad, man, of, like, Matha Shadal, also I'm drawing a card in a turn. It's awful.
Yeah, it's like, it's sort of different because the ones that we've been talking about so far are all in the extra deck, which means that you don't have to rely on drawing them, and that's a sort of, like, it's more consistent in a sense that you can always have some sort of access, but usually it's minus, or it takes your whole turn, or both, whereas, like, you can also play a certain number of just main deck dudes who have similar good effects, like Mathematician being the all-star, Foolish Burial on legs who floats, like, and there's, like, other cards that also fill this niche, like Curry Bandit, who, like, helps you get cards in grave, not minus, and, like, you can help to increase the density of your, like, consistency starter cards to make sure that your deck runs smooth.
Going on to Curry Bandit, cards which are kind of like ridiculed in the TCG, but I think are really good in Trinity. Sangan and Witch of the Black Forest. Like, they haven't seen too much play in Trinity, but realistically, you can search pretty much anything in your deck with them. Sangan specifically is much better because you can, you know, the old dream of tour guide into Sangan, make an Exceed search. Like, I like how that's actually realized with Link Monsters, where you can now go, like, Tour Guide Sangan, make a Nightmare, pop up one of their cards, search for something with Sangan, set up your turn.
Or make a Little Witch, and then add back the Tour Guide to the Sangan.
Oh,
so broken!
It's so good.
Oh my god.
Definitely, there's just so many different possibilities, and I think that as the months are going on, and especially now with Wee Witch's Apprentice in the format, a lot of people are running the Tour Guide engine because you can run it with just Tour Guide, Songon, and Archfiend Eccentric, which are... Archfiend Eccentric's a card that a lot of decks already want to run just because it's such good removal, and then when you have the Songon in the deck, Tour Guide is just a search any monster with 15 or less attack, which is extremely good.
I keep losing too in practice. I've played a lot of practice with Pacifist against Wa, and this player will use Sangan to make Wee Witch's Apprentice and then search Ghost Ogre. And it's unbeatable. There's just nothing you can do about it. It's like a completely telegraphed play that's incredibly powerful.
Do you think it's worth, like, next leveling them and playing a second Sangan? So when you Tour Guide into your Sangan, search Ghost Ogre, you make the Witch. When the Witch dies, you add back Tour Guide, so you can do it again next turn?
Well, the big brain is to play 2 Sangan so that you can get Sangan off your Sangan.
Well, playing more Tour Guide is...
Witch has seen a lot less play. Like, technically you can summon a Monk Witch, but that's a lot worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, like, if you run a spellbook engine, it provides an alternate target for Spellbook of Knowledge, but that's really marginal, I would say.
Being a dark spellcaster is pretty good. Being a level 4 is quite good.
Yeah,
and the search pool is much better, but there's just no way to like get it out.
Yeah, but like the slowness of the format means that you're not horribly punished for like T-setting your Witch or Sangan even if you don't draw the like God Hand of Tour Guide, which is like Tour Guide was good enough to play with Sangan like that when you were going into a 2000 attack effectively vanilla monster with an upkeep life point payment cost, and now you get something that floats and like has good arrows and helps buff your board. It's just like scary stuff.
Yeah. So do we want to talk about Last Will now?
Oh boy.
I think Last Will is probably one of the most unique consistency cards because it's been banned in TCG just for so long. This has been banned, I think, for over 10 years in TCG.
It's been banned since the first ban list, and it's never come back.
I think it was because it was legal.
It was legal in Goat Control, actually. That's true.
Because it was legal in Goat Control, so but it's been banned for over a decade. So it's effectively always been banned in TCG as far as most people are concerned, right? But it's legal in Trinity, so
it's one of those cards where like you look at the Trinity ban list, and you notice like something's not there, and it's Last Will, and just like it's engraved into TCG players that Last Will is this absurd card that just destroys the game. But it turns out when like you can't summon more than 3 times a turn, it doesn't really do much. It's just Mystic Tomato.
Yeah,
it's very good better. Mystic Tomato, but you know.
Yeah, there's like already synergy with stuff that we've talked about, like the spellbook engine with Blue Boy Secrets of Knowledge. You can like fire that off and then Last Will, or you can use Card D, who makes it your end phase. But Last Will is like you don't actually have. You can just activate it beforehand and then summon them in your end phase.
You can't do that. Card D stops you from special summoning.
Yeah, no. It gates you off from special summoning. But
really, oh shoot.
You can do things like you can do things like, you know, if you have a Gofu, you can make Gaia Saber pop off Last Will. You're still only at 1 summon from the Gofu, and now Last Will can start some other plays.
Yeah,
it's
that's
mostly
a better
just
example.
That you have to pretty much always summon at least once, usually twice, to proc it. And at that point, you're summoning a 1500 pointer. You usually can't make a big play after that, right? You're just going to be.
I think Link monsters kind of allowed Last Will and Trinity to like be much more viable. None of you guys played Trinity before Links were a thing, but like there was really no way to like trigger Last Will. But now with Links, you can. If you just have like 2 creatures, you just sink them, get anything from your deck. It's pretty good.
Yeah, and now like even something like Link Karibo, you can any level 1 monster immediately procs Last Will for like under the summon limit because you can just normal and then link into Link Karibo. And so like that helps certain decks like Altergeist who have a level 1 monster that gets an effect when it's sent to the grave, including by Link summon. So
yeah, and I think in general, it's the real reason why I say it's really balanced is that with that summon from Last Will, most decks aren't making a play. They're getting something that sets them up for a play 1 or 2 turns down the line, and that's sort of a common theme amongst a lot of these cards we've been talking about, is that consistency is more in setting up future plays as opposed to doing my big play now, like in TCG.
I'd say that the consistency you want in Trinity is finding duplicates of other cards. So like Armageddonite is good because it does whatever in your deck. But if you play Armageddonite and Rota, you're basically playing 2 copies of Armageddonite. And if you play Armageddonite, Rota, and Last Will, you're now playing basically a full playset. Like, sure, it's difficult to trigger the Last Will, and like maybe there's something better to search with Rota, but by playing things that search and like additional copies of very similar cards, it really ups your consistency.
And then, of course, decks that use those specific consistency tools that you can like MacGyver a playset out of, like move up in the tier list.
Yeah. So like I'm gonna bore people with statistics for a bit.
All right, I'm just gonna leave. Let me know when you're done.
being like a Highlander format, like it's not just playing one-offs. So in a 30 card deck, you have a 16% chance of drawing any specific card in your deck. But if you play a second copy of something, like a Reinforcement of the Army, you play the Last Will, you just up the consistency by a lot. And in Trinity, you can play additional copies of extra stuff for every extra 5 cards in your deck. And the more additional copies you play, like, you have a higher chance of drawing the card, even though your deck size is bigger. So you go from 16% to 27% in a 35-card deck playing a second copy of something. So I think this is going into, like, deck size, and is different from just consistency cards. But it's actually much more beneficial to play larger deck sizes if you specifically want to search a certain thing.
I think this sort of goes out into, because we've been talking about a lot of sort of generic searchers that can go in almost any deck, but this point feeds into how it's oftentimes beneficial if you have some Omni searcher for the archetype in your deck. Like, let's say you're running heroes and you have Stratos. You know, it can be worthwhile to run like an extra copy of some Shadow Mist or Stratos or something that's going to be giving you more searches, right?
Well, the beautiful thing with heroes is there are so many cards that search.
There's like 18 Stratoses.
Alright, there's Stratos, there's Shadow Mist, there's Foolish Burial that sends Shadow Mist, there's Armor which sends Shadow Mist, there's Reinforcement of the Army, there's E-Emergency Call, there's Last Will which summons Shadow Mist, gets the double search. That's 7 cards already?
Oh, and don't forget, there's Summoner Monk, who gets Shadow Mist, who gets Mask Change, who then will get something when you activate Mask Change.
That's 8 cards, and all of these 8 cards are without playing additional copies. If you like... If you play multiple Stratos or whatever, you can easily play a 60-card hero deck that's more efficient at getting heroes than like a 30-card hero deck.
Yeah, and I think, better, like a simpler example is like in Red Eyes, right? Like the big play in Red Eyes is you want to use Red Eyes Fusion, right? So if you run extra copies of Red Eyes Insight, even though your deck is bigger, you're more consistently going to be opening Red Eyes Insight, which is going to pop off your big play, right? Of getting the Meteor Black Comet Dragon.
And it's even better when, like, the quote-unquote garnets for that particular engine are still pretty good. Like, Red Eye's Spirit is a great card to search.
Yeah, and also how they don't brick in your hand, which is very nice, because you can always send from hand with Red Eyes. But either way, the point there is that with decks like that, like Red Eyes, I think is a great example of a deck where they have one card that you really want to be opening as often as possible, right? You really want to be opening Red Eyes Insight as often as you can. So playing multiple copies of that, even though your deck's 45 cards now or 40 cards or whatever, it's making your deck stronger because even though maybe you're drawing more wonky other cards, you're getting into that big play starter more often. And obviously this isn't true for every deck because a lot of decks don't have a card that's that crucial to them, but for decks that do, I think going to a larger deck size makes the deck more consistent.
I think the general rule of thumb is, if you want to search a specific card, or you have lots of searches, you play a bigger deck size. If you're playing just like pure good stuff, play like 30 cards if possible.
It's certainly not intuitive. While we're on the subject of decks that behave like that, I think this gets into a good discussion of the field spell searchers. Because one deck that I can think of that really, really wants to draw one singular card is the flip deck, which wants to find almost more than anything else Hidden City. It starts literally everything. You find Warrior, you make a rank 4, you make a Numastrix. I mean, Hidden City's a great card in its own right. And so, despite getting to play the incredibly powerful redundant suite of terraforming searchers, it still plays like 40 cards in order to jam as many Hidden City in there as possible.
And Hidden City here is a field spell, which lets you play the most bullshit field spell searches you have ever heard of.
Although, with Hidden City specifically, you gotta be careful with Metaverse, because if they MST your Metaverse and you chain Metaverse, your Hidden City will miss timing unless you add it to your hand. So it's something I found out the hard way.
Pro tip.
A card printed in 2016 can miss timing.
There was one other thing. I want to go back to the Red Eyes example just for a little bit, talking about increasing deck sizes being worth it. This particularly holds true because Red Eyes Fusion isn't something that you just have in a vacuum, because you need targets in your deck for it, which is usually a level 7 vanilla monster and a level 6 dragon monster that you can't just normal summon and make plays with. And while increasing your deck size, like, you can trade it off by... Goddamn, my cat. Sorry. You can trade off by like adding more insight to make getting the to the fusion itself more consistent, you also become less likely to draw multiples of your garnet halves of the engine while still being able to make plays. Because, playing a smaller deck size but playing the same number of garnets for the Red Eyes fusion package means that you're more likely to draw both Red Eyes and Light Pulsar, which is like a death sentence to have two really tough to work with cards in your hand unless you slowly fight your way out of it. So,
and even more frustrating is drawing the garnet and not the play starter and just waiting and just knowing that somewhere in your deck you are going to lose the game on one draw.
I'd say that happens a lot less in Trinity.
Certainly,
yeah, but it still
happen.
Happens.
And it's something that you can circumvent with deck building.
Well, going into this, there's more than just direct searching for consistency. There's also card draw, and man, is there a lot of card draw that you can play.
Oh, there is.
So, to start with, we'll go with the bad ones: Pot of Greed and Graceful Charity. No joke, they're actually bad cards because they're semi-forbidden.
Pot of Greed is bad. Treetop, you must be crazy. Please explain using math.
Well, if you're going into 35 cards to get your one Pot of Greed, you're not really increasing consistency. You're relying entirely on the fact the Pot of Greed's a +1. And at that point, they're just better +1s to be playing. Pot of Greed will only ever be played in the purest of good stuff decks, where the only synergy between your decks is the goopy value that wins you a game. And even then, Dark Hole's co-forbidden is probably going to be a better +1.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
While there exists generic cards that actually make plays guaranteed that are at co-forbidden or semi-forbidden, those are always going to be better, right?
We're not here to talk about how bad Pot of Greed is. We're here to talk about how good Graceful Charity can be. And realistically, this card can be absurd. You draw 3, then you draw 2 more cards, right?
And it helps that we spent the entire first half of this podcast talking specifically about decks that want grave setups. And here's a card that does everything.
I think Graceful Charity is underplayed. Not as a consistency card, just as a powerhouse, I'm going to win this game card.
Yeah, I think that Graceful Charity is really good, not in every deck, right? But in graveyard decks specifically, it's a play starter, and it gives you the consistency, right? Because it lets you filter through your deck.
And if you're playing 35 cards, you've still got 16% chance or something of actually getting to it. That's only in your opening hand. If the game goes long, you're definitely getting this at least once a match.
Yeah.
It's
because you can discard any card in your hand, it really gives you that kind of card, the discard quality, which really matters for something like Graceful Charity.
We should probably talk about actual consistency cards though, not just bullshit power things. Pot of Desires. Now this is really controversial. In the TC it's controversial because a lot of players are idiots. Trinity,
no punches
they're idiots
pulled.
And think that it's good. I would never disrespect my cards by banishing them face down.
Now, mathematically, this card is a -24. Getting past that...
Let me get out the whiteboard.
Getting past that is very different in Trinity, because, your deck is entirely one-offs. The TCG decks is bad in are supposedly the ones that play specifically one-offs. In Trinity, that's every single deck. But the, amount of glue that holds them together is quite different.
Right. In TCG, for example, as a dedicated Trickstar player, every time you activate Pot of Desires, you look at the pile, and it's always got your one of Lilybell. You just exhale deeply, and then you are resigned to the fact that you are probably losing this game. In Trinity, you scoop up 10 cards and look at 10 critical one-ofs and think, why am I playing Pot of Desires?
Yeah.
Do you think it's a bad card?
In Trinity?
Yeah, in Trinity.
I almost exclusively play decks that aim to search as much as possible, so yes, very much so.
I think it's literally absurd, and I don't know why, it's not played in
There are decks that certainly could be playing it. A 60-card deck, for example, that aims to just play as many good cards as possible should probably be on Pot of Desires. But I
have played Pot of Desires in 30-card Netcloth. No joke.
Ugh.
I feel like that's riskier.
That
So I
makes
think
me
Pot of
way
Desires
nuts.
is. I think Pot of Desires is definitely underplayed. That's almost indisputable in Trinity, right? But I think that it's only really effective in Trinity in decks that have those more TCG levels of redundancy. So like a deck that's good stuff where there really isn't like any really core engine in your deck. It's just a bunch of generic key value cards. It doesn't really matter if you banish 10 of them usually, right? Or in a deck like Rank 4 or Burning Abyss where you're running 25 cards that all just enable a Xyz play. It doesn't matter if I banish a bunch of random extra Rank 4 enablers because I still have more random Rank 4 enablers in my deck, right? And also, it's... if your deck is slow, then the banish 10 can actually matter a lot because unlike in TCG, Trinity games can go really long. And banishing down 10 cards and losing those resources, the argument of the main TCG argument I think for Desires is you never see those 10 cards anyway, and that's really not true in a lot of decks in Trinity. You probably would see those 10 cards in a lot of games.
I've played Control Mirrors where non-ironically, turn one, the two of us look at each other and go, alright, we're decking each other. Someone's gonna deck this game, and whoever doesn't play Card of Demise actually is the winner. Those are scenarios in which I would not advocate Pot of Desires.
Going on to Card of Demise, Pot of Desires, and also Graceful Charity, it's common knowledge in Go Control that just playing Graceful Charity turn 1 is not good, unless you actually have something to discard, right?
Yeah.
The fetchless
And-
brainstorm of GOAT.
Typically in Goat, you want, like, if you're playing your Knight Assassin, you can sort of, Knight Assailant, you can do that combo. Typically it's
Or
Sinister
Sinister
Serpent, yeah.
Yeah.
I think you can sort of carry over this idea of, like, holding the draw spell with Desires and maybe Demise. My idea here was, like, you play Pot of Desires even if your deck searches a lot, but you'll probably, you just hold it until you go through, like, one of your main search payoffs. So you don't use the Desires until you, like, get your tour guide, or unless you, like, have to play the Desires. Then you, like, drop your tour guide, you've searched the entire engine, and now there's really no redundancy in playing Desires. Like, you're not banishing any real components.
That's sort of what it comes down to, is like, it's kind of feels bad if you're playing a singleton deck that's like archetypal and you're hurt when you banish your like one of Subterror like Nemesis Warrior, and that like
don't even say it.
Yeah, that's like a big oof. But the thing is, so much of Trinity deck building is creating a deck that also like it in a sense it's like fighting against the Highlander nature of the format by finding cards that fill the same role as other cards so you aren't struggling when they're gone. Like, that's sort of what we've been talking about this whole podcast. Like, when you activate Pot of Desires and you banish your Armageddon Knight, but you draw your Mathematician off of it, that's not bad. Like, you don't care about that. You only care if you banish what you wanted to send off the Mathematician. And so
Even then, if you're playing Armageddon Knight and Mathematician, you probably have like quite a few things you want to mill. So it's very unlikely you're going to banish all of them with your Desires.
But inversely, we also spent the first half of this podcast talking about how great Laval Chain is because it can send the very important singleton from your deck to the graveyard. So I think the discussion about waiting until your big search payoff is pretty critical in this instance.
Yeah, definitely. Because then you're sort of setting yourself up so that you have the play that you can theoretically have. You have all your pieces to win. Even though it's not as direct as in TCG, it's the same general concept of you play Desires so that you can then win with the advantage off Desire.
I think the format really is slow enough, so in most matchups you can sort of like hold back on these draw spells. I know when Card of Demise was unlimited, I played a deck with 3 copies. And a lot of the time, I literally wouldn't activate it for like 5 turns in a row.
Oh, yeah.
Because I wanted to make sure 100% of the time that I would draw no more than 1 monster. Mm-hmm. And like, it's really worth, like, if you have like a monster in hand, you've already normal summoned, you have Demise, I think it's really just worth holding onto the Demise until you can guarantee that you get the most advantage out of it.
To be honest, as a person who plays Demise in almost everything I play, like, I think demising for 2 is maybe the most losingest play on the face of the earth.
why would you demise for 2 when you could demise for 3?
Exactly, right? Like, just hold the Ghost Ogre, throw it away on something useless, and the next turn you draw 3 cards.
And it's kind of similar with Desires, where, like, drawing 2 for realistically no cost is kind of just worth waiting a turn or 2 to see if you can, like, mill that one off that you really want before you use the... Yeah. And, like, it's so easy to make a Levaville chain. You can just make your chain, mill your thing, and then Desires, and then you've got, like... What's the American phrase? You've got your chocolate and your Nutella or whatever.
Chocolate and Nutella.
You have your cake and can eat it too. Nice.
The American one is you have your guns and your bacon and your disdain for minorities. I don't remember. It gets lost in translation.
But it's sort of like these... shoot, I forgot what I was going to say. Never mind.
Well, we've spoken about Desires for a long time, and I have a desire to talk about a different topic. Man, my puns are on fire tonight.
Congratulations on your self-congratulation.
Duality. Hasn't seen play for a very long time in the TCG, apart from, like, stupid burn decks.
Oh, whoa.
Like,
it's in good decks.
And, like, stun decks.
It's a one
Right.
Compared to,
it's
like,
in
when
True
it came
Draco.
out, and, like, when you played Duality and, like, wind-ups and stuff almost.
when it was
Yeah.
semi-forbidden.
Oh, man.
Like,
Duality hasn't seen too much play in Trinity. I think a lot of this reason is just because, like, people are so used to not playing it in the TCG. But I think, like, again, the format's slow enough that you can really just Duality for a turn. Just set some back row and pass.
I do think it is criminally underplayed. Having said that, the thing that it doesn't... The difference between this and TCG is that it faces a lot of stiff competition for similar draw spells. Like, for example, I don't want to leak lists or anything, but one of the people in Champs, Gavone, is playing probably the most good stuffy deck available, and he has the option to play Duality. It would be quite good in his deck, but instead he's playing like 4 different copies of Pot of Avarice clones, because those 2 cards kind of directly compete in a lot of ways. And it has to hit a very sweet spot of a spell that you want to be resolving because it's very valuable and filtering is good, and a spell that outclasses the multitude of similar draw spells in the format.
I remembered what I was going to say, and it's also related to this topic. The thing about Duality, and also, like, holding demise or desires in general, is that it's very much a trade-off of trying to maximize the amount of value you can get out of a card versus playing for tempo if you're worried about you're worried about dying. Like, sometimes you can't you have to try and dig for an answer for your opponent's, like, big, huge Black Comet Dragon whatever dude who's, like, beating your face in for 3,500, and spending your turn, like, using Duality so you can't special summon, so you set pass, is, like, very weakening there, where like, and that's sort of the trade-off here. A lot of these generic consistency pieces, that's sort of the issue with Sangan and Witch in general, is, like, drawing them is so powerful if you live so you can use what you've searched. And that's sort of why Tour Guide is, like, incredibly busted with Sangan, because it both triggers the Sangan search on your turn and also, like, establishes field presence and can answer something with a nightmare play. And so it's like, there's like the fundamentals there of considering playing for value versus playing for tempo. And
so that's really a skill that isn't tested in the TCG, because almost always you want to be prioritizing either tempo or doing all you can to prevent your imminent death.
Mm-hmm.
With a couple of exceptions, like maybe Altergeist, you really can't be like, oh, I can play from behind this turn so that next turn I can make a more explosive play.
Yeah, that's definitely a skill that used to exist in Yu-Gi-Oh! And just hasn't really existed since, like, Dragon Ruler format, where...
It's kind of the idea where you can, like, pass a turn and kind of use your life points as a resource to, like, draw more cards.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you just wait for a few turns, you don't die, because, like, there's no crazy OTK that's gonna, like, punish you out of nowhere. And you can really just take a few direct attacks to, like, draw a few cards.
The example given, Meteor Black, is about as bad as it gets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or, like, some specific OTKs, but those are so gimmicky that, like, usually if you're the kind of deck that just passes for a turn, if you have like one piece of back row, it disrupts it and stops
they're really
it
like
from killing
flimsy
you,
as
right?
well.
Yeah, there's not really any consistent OTK that also doesn't buckle to like a breakthrough skill or a fiendish chain.
Right? Yeah.
We've spoken about a few pots already. There's still Dichotomy and Avarice. Avarice is legal.
I can't believe everyone isn't playing Avarice. Like, I certainly
This sounds
can't.
absurd, right?
I certainly can't because I'm playing like 5 total monsters. But Avarice is incredible. It's insane.
It's really interesting comparing it to like when it was legal in the TCG. Even when it was at 1, it was staple in literally everything.
Of course, why would
like you
played it in clean.
Monster Reborn, Dark Hole, Heavy Storm, and Pot of Avarice. Like that's sort of the power bracket that we're looking at here.
I hate to go,
and it's even
no, go ahead.
It's even better in a singleton format where you use your single copy of an extra deck monster or something, and all of a sudden you don't have that solution. But you slap down Avarice and can put it back, and then you do again. So it's like...
There are so many decks that can just, like, fill the grave if you need to. Like, if you're playing Zodiac, you summon a Zoo, you put 2 guys on top. That's, like, over half of Avarice already.
Bada bing. I hate to go back to Gavon's deck, of course, but over anything else, it really is a deck that is living and dying off of the specific power of Pot of Avarice. Like, it's playing Pot and Jar and Zodiac combo, and resolving all 3 of those cards is completely unbeatable. Like, shuffling back, like, 4 Zoo Xyz and Whiptail, or 2 Volcanic Shells and 3 Zodiacs is so far above the curve, it's ridiculous. And then getting to draw off of it is just the spiciest upside. It really is like having your Nutella and Marmite too.
Is this like the Canadian version now?
Have you guys
Marmite?
tried Marmite before?
Australian.
Oh, no,
Never.
no.
I've tried. I've never tried Marmite though.
I literally have a jar of Marmite.
We're all filthy Americans.
I have a jar of Marmite on my desk right now.
Oh, disgusting.
Gosh, you
I
crazy.
am that English. Well, on the topic of other Yu-Gi-Oh cards, that's my like English accent.
That's pretty.
I've lost it since I've come to Germany. On the topic of Avarice, I think the reason people don't play Avarice is because like they're scared of it sometimes being dead because you need like 5 things in grave. Dichotomy kind of gets around that. How do you feel about that?
Dichotomy is just... obviously, it's a different card than Avarice, but it's a much worse card, in my opinion.
The restrictions are really killer when it comes to tempo versus value. Like, yeah, it's easier to set up in the same amount of value, but then you, like, lose your ability to interact with your opponent meaningfully with a battle phase, and it's just like, ugh. It requires even more setup because of its activation restrictions in a way, so... It's not bad. It's just like you're already playing... you would already want to play Avarice, which is like your conceding is totally dead turn 1 unless you draw really specific stuff, but is super powerful as the game goes on. And so adding like an equally dead card turn 1 that's like not quite as good is just...
I'm imagining
Little
drawing
rough.
a hand of like Pot of Avarice, Jar of Avarice, Pot of Dichotomy, Zodiac combo, and then just losing my mind.
Which I think is the trade-off where like there's only so many of these kind of draw cards that you necessarily need to be playing in like a 30 card deck per se, right? Like if you're playing too many, then they are going to start penalizing you because you're going to start like double drawing them without the setup. But once you start getting into the 40 and the 50 territory, you can very easily just throw in a bunch of these redundant cards to fill that space, right? Which I think comes into how easy it is a lot of the time, surprisingly enough, to go to 45 or 50 because there's usually staples that you can put in that can serve redundant roles and don't significantly drop the consistency of your deck that you can just sort of put in.
Yeah, and beyond that, there are even a handful of air quote staples that are so redundant that they almost don't exist, like Upstart Goblin and Chicken Game, which literally just cycle 1 card for like Upstart in particular. You just slap it down and it's as if it weren't in your deck and you now have 1 card deeper in your deck. And that matters even more in Trinity than in the TCG because your deck size, you're rewarded for having a bigger deck by being able to include more powerful and more copies of powerful cards in it. And so Upstart just being an instant cycle for the negligible cost of 1,000 life points is like, that's really good, but also really interesting to try and deck build around, because some decks that are like really small could actually use the oomph of something like Pot of Avarice in that same slot, because Upstart, like, it doesn't do anything for you except minor increase in consistency. Chicken Game's a little different because it you play the chicken game with your opponent. You activate it and get a draw, and then your opponent can activate it and get a draw, and like it just is really interesting.
I've got to say that I love the dynamic that Chicken Game creates.
Oh, it takes over the game.
Like,
it's so great.
But like, it's something that we haven't actually seen it in the TCG, because Chicken Game was really only used like either as an upstart, like an actual upstart, or like in the FTK.
Well, yeah,
just to be fair, that happened all. I started playing the day Chicken Game came out in TCG, and Chicken Game's my personal favorite card in Yu-Gi-Oh! That kind of interaction happened a lot before it really became like an FTK piece. Like, unless you're playing in Exodia or Magical Explosion, if you drop Chicken Game, a lot of the time it would end up just being this crazy back and forth, where like, I can't kill my opponent because Chicken Game's up and their life points are too low, but my life points are too low to blow up Chicken Game because our life points are 800 and 600. That kind of thing would happen a lot.
It's definitely it's a dynamic that you really cannot, like, under any circumstance, see in the TCG. Like, well, mostly because Chicken Game's banned. But even if it was legal, like,
yeah,
like, the game, it only works in, like, a certain speed of format. And Trinity is really, like, the perfect speed to, like, sort of, you can play the Chicken Game, and, like, if you think that you can, like, use your card advantage better than your opponent, you can really, like, push them and, like, play these crazy mind games, like, have I really got, like, better cards than you? How much life points are you willing to pay? Like, maybe you've got a sneaky way of getting under, like, 1,000.
And there's, like, a really, really interesting decision based on, like, deck choice there, because, like, you mentioned, like, thinking about whether or not you have better cards than your opponent. I think that's, like, a good skill that Chicken Game forces you to measure, is, like, understanding your deck's role in the match. Like, I'm playing the control deck, I, like, need these extra cards to help stabilize, but I know that my late game value will beat their, like, more fragile deck. And being able to make these decisions on the fly and understand when you, like, want to play the Chicken Game and when you want to cut that off, like, as soon as possible.
We could literally, we could do an entire podcast just on, like, how to play with Chicken Game. It's really that in depth.
But we won't, because I have to win champs before then. No one leaked the secret.
A big thing that people don't realize with the card, that I do quite a lot, is opponent plays Chicken Game, pays 1,000, draws a card. I think a lot of the time it's just correct to blow it up straight away. Sometimes people are, like, really greedy and, like, they want to draw a card or two with it first, but once you start the Chicken Game, like, there's no ending it.
Yeah.
When you start the Chicken
somebody
Game,
falls off the cliff.
you win or you die.
You either try to, like, you draw a card and then you try and, like, Castell it or Tornado Dragon it or something, or, like, you just blow it up on the spot, which not a lot of people, like, try and do.
Have you ever seen anyone gain 1,000 life points?
I don't think so.
That's like one of those things where you don't even think about that Chicken Game has that effect until all of a sudden you're like, oh, huh. Like, well, how you can't respond to the activation of its effects.
If you're doing it, you're winning the game with it. Like, every time I've seen someone gain 1,000, it's one of the game.
Make them gain a K so you can, like, attack, right?
Yeah.
Well, no, the idea is yeah, I think that was the design idea, but the only thing it was ever actually used for was you made them gain life points so that you could use Life Equalizer.
Yeah.
Oh,
which is why Life Equalizer
the FTK combos are ugh. Like,
moving
even
on through the sorry, Bossy, just destroying your, like, commentary again.
The second time I've been cut off.
Moving along, we've got the spellbook engine, same as the TCG. Blue Boy.
Indispensable for control decks. Oh my goodness. If you're not using your normal summon, boy does it feel good to draw 2 cards.
Quick mention to Last Will again. Triggers Last Will.
It's just slightly brickier, right? Because in TCG you can run it as, like, 1
2/2 or something like that.
Yeah, you can run a better ratio because you don't want to draw Spellbook of Knowledge unless you're actually playing a Spellcaster deck, because it's just dead in your hand. But still, a 2-to-1 Garnet ratio is pretty good for Trinity, honestly, and makes it worthwhile in a lot of decks to get that +1.
It's Pot of Greed that uses your normal summon and sometimes breaks you, right?
Well, and I think a lot of people originally discounted it because of the 33% of the time that you accidentally draw knowledge like an idiot. But since the advent of like nightmares and things, like just having cards that you don't feel bad about discarding isn't the worst thing in the world.
I think something interesting to consider going forward is the fact that Blue Boy is like this crazy control staple, but like Card D is basically unplayed, and I think that's like interesting because Card D is obviously worse in certain ways. Like it's significantly less tempo because you can't do anything on the turn you do it, and whatever you draw you can't set before the end phase comes around, so there's like hand size considerations, but it's still obviously like it's not as powerful as Desires, but it's in the same like area of this card has restrictions and is a fat plus.
It's very similar to the Spellbook engine. It's very
going
directly
back to like
comparable.
what we've been saying like the entire podcast, Highlander and Trinity is all about finding duplicates of cards so you can consistently pull off your play. And I think it's fine if you want to play Blue Boy as a normal summon Pot of Greed and Card D as a normal summon Pot of Greed. Like, playing both really doesn't have an issue.
Card D certainly is criminally underplayed.
I think that like finishes most of the list. We're also going to talk a little bit about Hidden Armory.
Yeah, we have no segue to this one. We're just talking about Hidden Armory.
I don't know, I think it's less good now that Snatch Steel's back at semi-forbidden. It still searches Premature Burial, which is good, but...
It's good in like Spiral or something where you actually have archetypal equips, but without even Snatch Steel as a staple, it's not really as relevant, I would say.
Even without it, though, it was pretty scary for any deck that needed a single co-card, and that was it. Yeah. To be able to play, like, Hidden Armory, Snatch Steal, and Premature, and that's it, and, like, 2 targets is enough to reliably get to Hidden Armory, and playing 2 Snatch Steals is really good and really swinging.
Hidden Armory can add from Grave to hand. So, like, realistically, if you just want a second copy of Premature Burial for free, like, go ahead with Hidden Armory, it's fine.
Yeah. And, of course, you know, there's no shortage of decks that, this doesn't happen a whole lot of the time, but play equip cards for Isolde costs and then potentially want to be able to toolbox them in some interesting way. Hidden Armory certainly
Moon Mirror Shield, I think, is fine, just as a card.
Well, I think something that people really aren't on right now, but that especially like rank 3 and 4 decks can leverage is Living Fossil.
Oh, Living Fossil is incredible.
It's marginally worse Premature Burial in most situations. I believe it's Premature Burial for a level 4 or lower, but it negates its effect. But that doesn't matter if you're using it for material. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And then you banish it when it leaves the field, I guess, but it doesn't cost life points. The restriction doesn't matter for most decks, because most decks outside of like dragons aren't really playing high-level monsters, so it's a very good card, and I think that Hidden Armory, Premature Burial, Living Fossil is a very legitimate engine that a lot of decks could be running.
I think it's a perfect way to like summarize like what this entire podcast has been about, which is just playing duplicates of cards that you can play to like get around the Highlander nature of the format. Like, why play 1 Premature Burial when you could play 3? You know?
Yeah. And I think it just gives a more interesting angle to it, because sure, it's essentially the same as playing a bunch of Premature Burials, but as opposed to a TCG of Premature Burial. Yeah, it's different, right? And because in TCG, you just look at the number of different unique cards in a deck, and it's like 15 to 20. But in Trinity, it's, however many cards are in your deck is usually the number of different cards in your deck.
Well, absolute minimum is 30, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, even with Unbounds, most decks are playing, at least like 25 unique cards. That's like the lowest you can really manage to go without your deck like being a joke, right? And it's just, I'm talking about like unique different cards, right? Because you can play like 3 Shell and 3 Rat here or something like that in a 30 card deck, but still, like, most decks are playing 30 plus unique cards, and that just gives so much more variety in every game, just in terms of like what you're seeing, what you have to do with every card.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like sometimes it seems sort of counterintuitive that this format is like explicitly a Highlander format, and all of our like thoughts about deck building are how best to undermine the fact that this is a Highlander format. But the thing is, solving that problem is part of what makes it interesting. Thinking about the game in ways like, what roles do my cards fill and how can I better like provide what my deck needs is just more interesting than being like, okay, let's add 3 of each name stamp guy and then start adding staples and 3 of each and then
3 engage. We can play one of the bad ones. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just because in TCG deck building is always you play 3 of all of your really good consistency cards and then 1 of all your engine pieces, and that's just how you play it when you're building an optimal deck. But in this, just because of the way Trinities work and the way the format is, playing like, I don't know, like 2 copies of your best card or something can be optimal in a lot of decks. Just because you don't really want to go up another 5, or you don't need to because you have a bunch of redundancies, and it just, there's so much more deck building variety.
And there's so many variants of like every type of deck. There are 30 card, 40 card, and even like 60 card variants of a lot of things.
And even though one might theoretically be the most optimal, the differences between them aren't so much that player skill can't bring you there, in a way that in TCG isn't really true, right? Where, like, if my deck is a lot less consistent than my opponent's deck in TCG, player skill's just not going to bring me there because it doesn't matter as much.
And just by playing different cards, you're playing, like, a different game every time. I don't really think I've ever played, like, multiple Trinity games and had them all be exactly linear. Like, I'm doing the exact same steps every game, right? Maybe you've got, like, some combo or, like, some really consistent first-turn play, like, I want a first-turn Beatrice or something. The rest of the game will really unfold to be different. But the amount of, like, TCG games I've had where you just perform a combo, they do their combo, it's over. Like, you know
your
what I mean?
opponent hand loops you, and you didn't have a hand trap, and literally 0 cards in your hand matter, and they're all in the grave anyways.
Yeah,
well, that's enough bitching on the TCG.
I won't have you hating Droll-and-Lock looping 8 rounds in a row. I really appreciate that style of gameplay.
it landed Mono his bubble at Nationals.
Ooh, shade.
Has anyone got any final comments to make on consistency?
Remember, kids, the most easy way to be consistent is to play 3 of your best card, and the only deck that can do that while playing as few cards as possible is Pacifist. Pacifist. It's just the right choice.
Prawn's not even here, but we still had like an advert, right?
We still have an ad.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I am
sponsors
sponsored.
like you who keep the Trinity podcast alive.
Please use my promo code Second Effect on pacifistthephantasmcity.com.
With just 1 upvote on our Reddit post advertising the tournament, you too can help support these poor admins and their stupid alternate format.
Using promotional code MonoBlueTron, you can add Phantasm Spiral Battle to your deck using only 3 additional cards.
Hey, thanks everyone for putting that to Co-Forbidden, by the way. See you next format.
You're welcome.
Until then, stay groovy. Was that good?
Yeah.